Let me start by inviting the three of you from the business sector to share with us your comments and vision on how we move forward. We have seen a number of ideas and proposals and engagement here during various sessions. And since Greenland is the host country, let me start so let me start with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
A very simple question, how to move forward, is to put one foot in front of the other. No, seriously, what we hear about being repeated over and over again is climate. It is obvious, I think, for all of us that the world is experiencing a climate crisis for which I think the Arctic not only has threats presented to it, but also major opportunities, if I may say so. And just like when we had other resource crises in the world, energy crisis and so on, focus had been directed to geographical areas in the world with a lot of investments and a lot of activity. And I think the opportunity is, in the case of the Arctic, to actually look at the value of knowledge, the value of science, and the value of presenting solutions to the globe on how we combat the climate crisis. And with that also very practical applications of that science in terms of how do we convert excess energy into usable, distributable energy, how do we create zero or circular economies, because in Greenland we actually have 62 locations where you can practice circular economies because we have 62 very isolated economies, and that can easily be transformed into scientific or scientifically research-based locations for practicing what you can do in the rest of the world. So even though we are only 56,500 people, the solutions you can find in a place like Greenland can be applied to all 8 billion peoples. And that means the gearing, now we talk about investment and gearing, the gearing of that investment, investing in 56,500 people, geared up towards 8 billion people, is an immense gearing that you cannot find in any other place in the world. So I think the investment opportunities related to climate change and related to the minerals and the knowledge creation, even from tourism and active tourism related to getting to know what's going on in the world, present huge, vast opportunities for investments in Greenland that can be put into great applications for how to save the planet.
Yes, I think both Arion Bank in Iceland and PT Capital in Alaska share the view that despite all the problems and challenges we've heard today about in the Arctic is also an area for potential profit and economic progress. So let's hear from both of you how you see that evolving.
Yeah, I think what is very critical here is that kind of the investment environment is structured and based on international best practice, attracting the best capital, the best knowledge at any point in time. And I think the environment has actually changed dramatically in that sense in the past 10, 15 years. Sustainability has come massively into the equation, and there isn't an investment firm or a financial institution that hasn't put this at the forefront. And the key thing, because with capital comes knowledge, is to attract the best capital from all of these standpoints, long-term investment horizon, the sustainability approach to it as well, and the best knowledge and best science at any point in time. And that is obviously the challenge, to make sure that we draw and find the investors or the investment that is suitable for the area and helps sort of spur the or fuel the thing that I think this area has to offer, which is the energy transition, the solution to the problem. And as I said at the beginning, the investment environment has changed so dramatically that I think this actually could become much easier to do now than ever before.
Hugh.
Thank you, President Grímsson. My name's Hugh Short. I'm the CEO and co-founder for PT Capital. About 10 years ago, I had the crazy idea to start a private equity firm that focused on the Arctic. I grew up in a small town on the west coast of North America, 400 miles from any road. It's named Bethel. I can remember as an 18-year-old looking at the jet flying out twice a day, thinking I got to get on that jet. And it's been a journey the last 10 years. We originally had the thesis that there was really 4 or 5 common factors amongst the Arctic: seafood, energy, minerals, logistics, tourism. Those are key common factors in the Arctic. And if you go to Greenland, it's my first time here, I see those same economic sectors here. You go to Iceland, very similar. You go back to my home in Alaska, it's very similar. You go to Canada, a lot of similarities. I think the key for at least our investors and our team has been global capital that's interested in investing into the Arctic, but doing it in a way that's environmentally friendly, that actually works with stakeholders, and that actually is a good corporate citizen. I know that's said a lot, but today we've got companies from the Russian border in Finland all the way to the Russian border in Alaska and everything in between. We've built out quite a portfolio, and I'm pretty proud of that. There's been 4 factors, I think, that have helped us in our journey. And I think the first factor is local partners. So a little story about Iceland. In 2017, March of 2017, we became a 50% owner in this, I think at the time, the largest telecommunications company in Iceland. Fast forward to June of 2022, and with the help of my good friend over here and his institution, Arion, we were able to take that company public in an IPO. We have now, I haven't calculated exactly, but 1 to 1.5% of Icelanders are shareholders in Nova. So 5,500 shareholders. And capital from Alaska, expertise from Alaska coming to Iceland, I believe is, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I believe it was the first IPO in the Icelandic NASDAQ by a foreign-owned company. So we're pretty proud of that. I think the second thing that we really focused on is, and I saw this in Iceland quite a bit, there was a hunger for new investors to come into companies and be on the boards because there was so much family connections. And I get this from my hometown, there's 7,000 people. But on every board, it's really the same people or people you're related to. And so a foreign investor coming into a company and actually holding management accountable, not having the history of family connections that we're related, that I'm your cousin, where he looks, all of those types of things, really allowed the companies, I believe, to improve their performance. And I think results came from that. And so I think specifically in Iceland, I thought that was a real experience. I think third is you have to find companies that need to take the next step and need additional growth capital. Not every company, at least for what we do, we're not venture capitalists. We invest into mature companies and then we grow these companies. You need to find the right company, the right team. You can look at 100 companies and say no to all 100. It's a very tough business on that end, and that's really the discipline in the business to make sure you're investing with the right people. And then finally, I think most recently, our experience in Iceland was to bring capital to Iceland. In June of 2022, Iceland's largest tourism company invested a substantial amount of money into Alaska in a 50-50 joint venture with PT Capital. So I really look at that as saying 10 years ago, my goal was to invest into the Arctic. 10 years later, we have companies like Iceland investing into Alaska, bringing their expertise in tourism and enhancing our economy in Alaska. So all of those factors, I believe, bode well for future investment. I think future investment is going to be significant, and the amount of capital today available is not nearly enough to be able to grow the jobs and the economies and the societies in the Arctic.
Well, thank you very much. It's a very interesting track record that offers a lot of lessons for what we can do, because as I said earlier today in another session, if anybody had described 10 years ago how Alaska would become a major player in the Icelandic economy, everybody would have treated that as a joke, quite frankly. So I think your name will always be in Icelandic history. So let me ask the two ministers. Before we listened on the screen to one of the influential ministers in the United Arab Emirates, previously responsible for the climate, now for foreign trade, describing that how this hugely rich but small country, in fact, the citizens of Abu Dhabi are fewer than us in Iceland, for example, have decided to invest tens of billions of dollars in clean energy projects in different parts of the world. And the minister also committed to the interest of the UAE in exploring a new Arctic trade sort of mechanism. I think this is a quite, if I may say so, historic offer from a country which is far away from the Arctic. But let's remember the UAE through MASTA and then the climate ministry has been a founding partner in the Arctic Circle, and they have demonstrated their commitment to the climate change battle through hosting the COP meeting and hosting also IRENA, the Renewable Energy Agency. So let me ask two of you, how do you think the governments of Greenland and Iceland would react to genuine, responsible partners like the one we heard, wanting to enter into a dialogue with Arctic countries and those who represent the Arctic people on a new type of a common partnership in order to facilitate Arctic investment, Arctic trade, economic progress on the basis of the principles that have been described here, for example, by the Prime Minister of Greenland and others. Because I think it's very important when a person like Dr. Thani, whom we just listened to, puts this on the table. It's not just a speech at a forum, it's a formal offer. And I'm not expecting the final definite answer. I'm just asking you to think about it in front of the audience. If I can ask you now to start.
Well, I think what's been the message today from everybody on stage is that we are absolutely willing to engage with the world in solving, for instance, the climate crisis, and to engage in investments now I'm speaking about Greenland, and I think, as I said, as long as you adhere to our rules and regulations in Greenland, you respect the terms in which we want to make business, then absolutely we want to engage in partnerships. And I think I started my speech by addressing the prehistoric times. But really, we have been experts in, because what our ancestors faced, what they could use is exactly the same resource that we today are harvesting. So we've been harvesting this resource for many, many, many years. And we are really experts in our own fields. So what we need is partners from outside to take it further. And we are right now seeing the tipping point. Investing in the north has been really expensive for many years. But something has changed within the last couple of years. And I think we see a tipping point now, and we will see more investors coming, and we will engage with everybody in a serious way. And we will, I think, at some point, go further.
Yes, thank you. I think this is a very interesting offer, and I think this is something that we should work on with our colleagues that have the same aims as ourselves. Like my colleague from Greenland, I mean, I think the key thing is always when you're forming a policy that there's a domestic ownership of the policy, that the investors that come into the country, that they, respect domestic policies, the rules and regulations, and then you will have a successful joint venture with the authorities here and the international investors. I also want to comment on some of the observations made here. For one thing, I think that you're absolutely right that we are on a certain tipping point, that you will have here in Greenland some of the resources that will be the solution to the climate challenge. And I think the opportunities are, they are enormous. Secondly, I think like, the CEO of Arion mentioned, with capital and investment comes knowledge. And that's the key thing going forward. Unless you have investment, you will not have growth. It is a necessity as regards to growing societies. And thirdly, I would like to mention all the investment that is coming now, the Arctic investment in Iceland and also into Alaska, I think is fantastic, especially because we're focusing on kind of a cluster knowledge. And the items that Mr. Short identified are exactly, basically in my ministry, with tourism, with trade and investment. And the key thing is that, we share knowledge and then we can all grow together. And I think it's a win-win situation. And finally, I want to, mention like the Arctic Circle, this forum for individuals to meet and form a policy that can actually provide solutions going forward as regards to the climate change is very, very important.
Yes, we are partly running out of time, so I'll ask for just brief comments.
It will be brief. I agree with your words, and I just want to say that you mentioned that we cannot grow without investments, and I agree with that. But I also will just make a nod to the fact that we are small communities in the Arctic, so we cannot just go about without thinking about the local communities, and we need to make sure that the local communities are on board with this, because if not, only the projects will prosper and not the local communities. So it's really important, I think, to be sensitive about the difference of doing business in a country with a large population and countries with a smaller population. But I think it's the right path forward, and I think there's absolutely a way through that.
Because I think it's very important to realize that the value space that lie behind investments should not be regarded as investments for the Arctic, but it should be regarded as investments with the Arctic for the world. I mean, this is the gearing I'm talking about here, that we should not delve into investments for the Arctic and Arctic infrastructure itself, because that is not relevant. The real problem here is the wave of climate change, where we can actually find solutions in collaboration with people like us that has immense opportunities for the rest of the world. And that's where the gearing is. And I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, I think that's a fitting end to this dialogue here among this panel. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions from the audience, but the final plenary session here on the stage will be about the COP process and climate change, both the COP in Glasgow, the upcoming one in Egypt, as well as the one in the UAE, which we have talked about a lot today. So I thank you all for your participation and contribution, and invite the moderator of the next panel and the final plenary panel to come on the stage, please.